"Do you truly understand?" she asked, her voice trembling not from fright, but with the indignation that made her a star, the sort that sparked endless viral moments. "What it means to be a foreigner in this nation at this very moment. To rise each day in dread that your mother, your father, or your offspring might be seized from their residences by weaponized agents. Do you have any concept of that sensation?" Director Patel saw she was on her feet. "You are generally expected to remain seated during a congressional inquiry, as members typically pose queries from their chairs. However, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had stood up because the occasion required it, because the lenses required it, because this was the sequence that would secure the 30-second snippet leading every broadcast, dominating every feed, and generating massive small donor funds before midnight. The Rayburn hearing chamber was filled to capacity, every spot occupied, with the media section bursting at the seams. The tag, Patel hearing, was already gaining traction online. AOC's digital strategy unit monitored from her workspace 3 levels above, fingers poised over the publish key, prepared to edit, caption, and launch the instant she landed the fatal blow. FBI Director Kash Patel rested at the testimony desk. He was dressed in a navy suit without a necktie. His hands were clasped before him. He had a binder to his left, with thick, color-coded dividers, though he had not yet cracked it open. He had anticipated this specific inquiry, not by predicting the precise phrasing, but because he recognized the rhythm. He had analyzed her previous inquisitions the way a litigator reviews an adversary. She invariably concluded with an emotive appeal. It was the query intended to force the witness to either concede and appear frail or object and seem cruel. In either scenario, she triumphs. In either scenario, the footage spreads globally. Only this occasion she had committed an error. She had posed a challenge she believed lacked a valid defense. She was mistaken. Patel moved closer to his audio device. His tone was steady and unhurried. It was the sound of a man who had litigated homicide trials in Miami and terror charges in federal tribunals, learning years ago that the softer you speak, the more intently people strain to hear. "Congresswoman," he began, "my parents relocated to this land from India. My father arrived carrying only a suitcase and a diploma that no one here accepted. I was raised in Garden City, New York, inside a home tinier than this committee chamber." He hesitated. "Not for theatrical effect, but for accuracy. And before I ascended to National Security Prosecutor, before I served in the White House, before I was named Director of the FBI, I dedicated my early years as a public defender in Miami-Dade County, Florida. I advocated for the most impoverished and defenseless individuals within the penal system. Many among them were migrants. Many lacked documentation. I sat beside them in detention blocks. I pleaded their arguments in front of magistrates. I ensured they possessed legal counsel because that is what the Constitution mandates." He stared straight at her. "So undoubtedly, Congresswoman, I have some concept." The atmosphere transformed, not theatrically, not in the manner movies depict, but rather how a courtroom adjusts when a deponent reveals something the jurors hadn't foreseen, causing everyone to silently recalibrate. AOC's lips parted and then shut. She had been unaware he was a public defender. It was missing from her briefing papers. Her staff had prepped her for a Trump devotee, a plotter, a deep state fighter lacking authentic legal standing. No one had informed her regarding Miami-Dade. No one had mentioned the detention cells, the undocumented patrons, or the years he had occupied the opposing side of the very structure she was charging him with abusing. Patel was not done. "But let me explain what I find curious, Congresswoman. While I stood in those tribunals defending migrants, ensuring they possessed attorneys, ensuring their liberties were guarded by the judicial process, you were broadcasting a seminar instructing them to defy federal agents, to avoid retaining counsel, and to bypass exercising rights through standard avenues, to resist, to generate, and I am citing you verbatim, enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go. He allowed the citation to settle. Do you realize the result when an undocumented individual physically opposes a federal agent serving a legitimate warrant? They receive extra felony indictments, obstruction, and resisting detention. Counts that make it exponentially more difficult for any solicitor, any public defender such as I once was, to assist them. Your seminar did not safeguard migrants, Congresswoman. It placed them in severe legal peril. And you understood that. Or you ought to have. Silence, the sort that lenses adore and legislators dread. AOC remained standing at her bench. The microphone was active. The crimson light on her clock was still flashing. And for the premier instance in her legislative tenure, a career constructed on never lacking a retort, she possessed nothing to utter. To comprehend how they arrived at this juncture, how the most media-literate representative in Congress stepped into an inquiry she crafted as a spectacle and exited as its target. You must rewind 3 hours to the morning when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was practicing her queries before a looking glass, unaware that the man she was preparing to grill had already reviewed every fiscal declaration, every conduct report, and every message she had ever published. It was 7:30 when she reached her suite in the Longworth House office building. Her chief of staff, Mike Casca, was waiting there with espresso, a printed schedule, and the digital metrics from the prior evening's teaser uploads. Interaction is off the charts, Casca noted. The Instagram update regarding your preparation received 2 million impressions. The post concerning holding Patel to task has 40,000 shares. Left-leaning outlets are ready. They are anticipating explosions. They will receive them, AOC replied. She took her seat and unclasped the file. Inside lay 5 queries, each one meticulously drafted, each one intended not to extract data. Legislative hearings rarely extract data, but rather to manufacture a scene, a snippet, a segment of media that would circulate. The tactic was elementary and had succeeded every single time. Question 1. Define the human toll. Cite families. Cite offspring. Force the witness to either validate the misery, which makes the regime appear sadistic, or ignore it, which makes the deponent appear unfeeling. Question 2. Shift to statutory breaches. Reference a distinct instance. An undocumented mother held at an educational facility. A parent removed from a clinic. Render it intimate. Question 3. Assault his credentials. Patel lacks an FBI history. He is a partisan tool. State it while recording. Question 4. The payoff. The sentimental finale. The do you even view them as people query that would evolve into the post, the banner, and the donation solicitation. We are not present to obtain responses from Patel, Casca cautioned her. We are present to obtain footage of Patel. AOC concurred. She mastered the sport better than anyone in the legislature. She had innovated the contemporary iteration of it. Before her, congressional inquiries were dull C-SPAN events that no one viewed. She had transformed them into viral media mills, and her interrogation of subjects had garnered more watches than most streaming series. She comprehended framing, rhythm, the hesitation before the fatal strike, and the instant to gaze straight into the lens rather than at the subject. Patel is a mega devotee with no genuine police experience. Her press secretary, Jared Stein, remarked, He secured the position because he drafted a report for Devin Nunes and appeared on Fox News sufficiently. He will act defensive and dodgy. That is our objective. Recall the Zuckerberg session, Casca said. You made him perspire for 5 minutes, and the video hit 60 million views. Same strategy. Patel is Zuckerberg wearing a shield. AOC grinned. She was dressed in a crimson blazer, a power shade that stands out on film, and gold hoops she had purchased from a local vendor in the Bronx that she would subsequently tag on Instagram. Every element was designed: the attire, the jewelry, the binder she would bear into the chamber, visible to lenses, tagged in thick ink. Accountability. She had discovered early on that legislative sessions are not arguments, they are performances, and she was the finest director in the House. Her digital coordinator, Maya Torres, reviewed the upload agenda. We have a pre-hearing message queued for 9:45. Today, I am holding the FBI responsible for its crusade against migrant households. Draft video descriptions are prepped for 3 outcomes: him declining to respond, him becoming defensive, or him uttering something provocative. We also have the donation email written. Subject line: I just challenged the FBI director regarding his assaults on immigrants. He did not appreciate it. Excellent, AOC stated. What they did not realize, could not have realized, because they had conducted the sort of shallow opposition research that stems from reading banners rather than legal briefs, was that Kash Patel had litigated more jury trials than AOC's entire staff combined. That he had commenced his profession not as a Republican strategist, but as a public defender, representing poor clients in one of the most frantic penal courts in the nation. That he had passed 3 years at the Justice Department under Barack Obama prosecuting extremists. That he had imprisoned al-Qaeda agents in trials that demanded the sort of thorough, systematic readiness that congressional drama does not. They assumed they were getting ready to roast a political amateur. They were getting ready to cross-examine a litigator. 3 streets over in the FBI director's suite at the Hoover Building, Patel sat with his chief counsel Lauren Mitchell and deputy director Dan Bongino. The monitor was active, silenced, displaying the cable news prelude. Every network was broadcasting the identical graphic. Patel to endure grilling on border control. She intends to go sentimental first, Bongino noted. Families being separated, babies weeping. She will possess a photograph. She invariably possesses a photograph. Then she will shift to my eligibility, Patel stated. She is going to label me a partisan hack, say I am unfit. And then the finale, Mitchell contributed. The grand emotional query, the one crafted to go viral. Patel unlatched his folder. It was arranged with colored dividers. Blue for AOC's public remarks. Red for the House Ethics Committee dossier. Green for FEC records and campaign funding logs. Yellow for the seminar transcript. Here is what she fails to grasp, Patel said. She assumes I will sit there and endure it. She assumes I will act defensively. Every subject she has ever interrogated has been defensive because that is what occurs when a lens is in your face and someone is charging you with being a villain. You recoil. You stutter. You appear culpable even when you are innocent. He drummed on the binder. But she has never cross-examined someone who has conducted cross-examination. She is accustomed to financiers who get jittery, tech CEOs who speak in buzzwords, and cabinet heads who have been trained to offer non-answers. She is not accustomed to someone who intends to let her speak, wait for her to conclude, and then recite her own documents back to her. Mitchell agreed. The ethics panel report is the most potent card, completely bipartisan. 5 Democrats affirmed it. She cannot label it a Republican smear. The seminar transcript is the second most potent, Bongino added, her own voice, her own terms. Friction, resist. You cannot reframe your own phrasing. And the FEC record is the finale, Patel said. She constructed her entire image on being pure. No corporate PAC funds. It is in her Twitter bio right now, today. And the FEC log reveals nearly $1 million funneled through PACs and shell entities that her chief of staff managed. She is either deceiving about her image or oblivious to her own accounts. Neither is a positive appearance. He shut the folder. I am not going to act defensively. I intend to answer her queries fully, honestly, and in depth, and every response will incorporate a fact about her that she does not want filmed. Bongino smiled. Judo. Judo, Patel affirmed. She supplies the force. I supply the trajectory. The session commenced at 10 o'clock. The committee chamber was already at capacity 30 minutes prior to the gavel. AOC entered via the primary hallway, with Clyde and Bowman flanking her, flashbulbs popping, offering a curt remark to the media gaggle at the entrance. Today we hold this regime liable for its crusade against migrant households. She strode in like a pugilist, stepping into the square, chin raised, shoulders retracted, the red coat vivid against the timber-paneled walls. The file labeled Accountability was apparent to every lens in the space. Patel entered through a side passage. No retinue, no declaration. Merely a man with a notebook walking to a testimony desk. He took his seat, fixed his microphone, and cracked a container of water. He resembled a bookkeeper arriving for a quarterly assessment. The divergence was intentional on both ends. AOC desired spectacle. Patel desired tranquility. She wanted the inquiry to feel like a clash. He wanted it to feel like an inspection. Only one of them would receive what they desired. Chairman Jim Jordan brought the chamber to order and recited the introductory remarks. The Committee on the Judiciary will come to order. Today, we will receive evidence from FBI Director Kash Patel regarding the Bureau's policing objectives, with specific emphasis on counterterrorism, cartel disruption, and border security. The initial 90 minutes were standard. Republican members queried Patel regarding FBI maneuvers, detention figures, and fentanyl captures. Patel replied with digits: 25,000 migration-related detentions since January, 350 Tren de Aragua gang affiliates, 195 MS-13 members, 66,000 kilograms of cocaine, 1,500 kilograms of fentanyl, 59 foreign spy operatives detained for treason. The figures were significant, but they were dull on film, which is precisely what AOC was banking on. By the time her 5 minutes came, the viewers would be starving for something sentimental, something human, something that sliced through the statistics. She intended to supply it. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York for 5 minutes, Jordan announced. AOC sat up straighter in her chair, fixed her audio, and gazed straight at Patel. Not at the lens, not just yet. That would follow. For the moment, she watched him the way a district attorney watches a hostile subject. Director Patel, she initiated, since you assumed command of the FBI, your bureau has engaged in what can only be defined as a massive dragnet focusing on migrant populations. ICE sweeps in residential zones, officers appearing at schools, parents held in front of their offspring. Is this the FBI you are honored by? Patel leaned inward. Congresswoman, I value the inquiry. Permit me to offer some background for those missions. Since January 20th, the FBI has detained over 25,000 people in relation to border enforcement. Of those, roughly 9,000 were marked for violent penal records, prior guilty verdicts for homicide, assault, sexual crimes, and narcotics dealing. 350 were verified members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan jail syndicate that has built hubs in at least 17 American cities. 195 were MS-13. He hesitated. He allowed the figures to land. We also captured 500 kilograms of fentanyl during these sweeps. Fentanyl, as you are aware, claims roughly 70,000 Americans annually. 1,500 kilos is sufficient to terminate every inhabitant of New York City 3 times over. Director Patel, I did not inquire about fentanyl. You asked if I am proud of the FBI's missions. I am, because every single one of those captures signifies a neighborhood that is more secure. Many of those neighborhoods, I must mention, are migrant neighborhoods. The prey of Tren de Aragua are predominantly Latino migrants, individuals who entered this nation lawfully and are now being blackmailed, menaced, and battered by a Venezuelan prison syndicate that crossed the southern boundary. The victims of fentanyl trade are predominantly working-class Americans, including migrants in your specific district. He adjusted slightly in his seat. I would also mention that the FBI has detained 59 foreign intelligence agents since January for spying or trafficking hazardous materials into the nation. 59 foreign spies, not migrants. Spies. There is a distinction, and I would value it if this panel acknowledged it. We are shielding the people you assert to represent, Congresswoman. The issue is whether you would favor that we ceased. AOC's jaw clenched. This was not proceeding according to the screenplay. He was not supposed to possess figures ready. He was not supposed to shift to shielding migrants. She required to reclaim command. Director Patel, you hosted a webinar where you outlined your scheme to, and I cite, crush violent crime. But Tom Homan, your border czar, has openly threatened to indict me for holding a Know Your Rights session for my voters. A session where I recited from the Constitution. Is this your FBI that menaces members of Congress for reciting the Bill of Rights? Patel nodded gradually. I am pleased you brought up that webinar, Congresswoman, because I have reviewed the transcript, your complete transcript, not merely the segments your staff published, and I would wish to read one excerpt back to you if the chairman allows. Jordan nodded. Patel opened the yellow divider in his notebook. He located the sheet and read in a level, deliberate tone, quote, "When one of these things arrives in your backyard, you can resist. And when that occurs across millions of people, you generate enough friction that they cannot go as fast as they want to go." End quote. He looked up. Congresswoman, that is not reciting the Constitution. The Constitution states you have the right to remain mute. It states you have the right to a lawyer. It states you are shielded from unjustified searches. Those are liberties, and everyone, citizen and non-citizen alike, is owed them. I endorse those liberties. As a former public defender, I spent years ensuring people comprehended those liberties. But you did not recite the Constitution in that broadcast. You directed millions of viewers to defy federal policing. You told them to manufacture friction. That word, friction, is not a constitutional phrase. It is a tactical phrase. It signifies physical blockage. And when undocumented persons adhere to that suggestion and physically fight officers serving valid warrants, they do not acquire rights. They acquire felony indictments. He placed the transcript down. If one of my officers held a class teaching people how to generate friction against police missions, I would fire them. And I find it striking that a legislator who swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States is vigorously tutoring people on how to oppose the execution of those statutes. AOC's press director, watching from 3 levels above, messaged Casca. She needs to shift now. Casca glanced at his mobile, then at AOC, but she was already shifting. She could sense the bout slipping away from her, feel the atmosphere in the chamber leaning toward Patel, and she did what she always did when a line of inquiry was failing. She went personal. Director Patel, let us discuss your credentials. Before becoming FBI director, your main experience was as a political strategist for Congressman Devin Nunes. You wrote a memo that was broadly debunked. You pushed conspiracy theories regarding the Russia probe. You have zero background running a law enforcement bureau. How can the American public rely on you to guide the FBI? She said it rapidly. Machine gun cadence. The method that succeeded on camera because it allowed the witness no moment to reply before the subsequent charge landed. But Patel did not attempt to address each charge. He waited until she was done. He let the quiet extend for 2 full seconds, an eon in a hearing chamber. Then he spoke. Congresswoman, since you have brought up the topic of credentials, I am glad to address it. Let me guide you through my profession since you appear to be unacquainted with it. I finished law school and commenced my work in 2005 as a public defender in Miami-Dade County, Florida. For 3 years, I advocated for destitute defendants, people who could not pay for counsel. Many were migrants. Many were undocumented. I litigated jury trials spanning from homicide to drug trade to intricate fiscal fraud. In 2014, I entered the Department of Justice as a national security prosecutor under President Obama. I directed inquiries across various theaters of war and personally prosecuted members of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I tried those matters in federal court. I secured guilty verdicts. I then acted as senior counsel for the House Intelligence Committee, where I steered the probe into Russia's meddling in the 2016 vote, an inquiry that both sides concurred was essential. I revealed intelligence negligence during the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane probe, discoveries that were subsequently validated by the Inspector General. I served as Deputy Assistant to the President on the National Security Council, where I managed counterterrorism missions, including the removal of top Al-Qaeda and ISIS leadership and the recovery of dozens of American captives. He paused. Now, Congresswoman, your profession. You graduated from Boston University in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in international relations and economics. You labored as a bartender and server, which is truthful and dignified labor. In 2018, you were voted into Congress. You have never litigated a case. You have never led a criminal probe. You have never possessed a security clearance. You have never prosecuted or defended anyone in any tribunal. I do not say this to belittle your career. You have accomplished notable things in electoral politics, but you unlatched this gate. You challenged my eligibility. So I am merely placing both of our CVs on the surface and allowing the American populace to determine who is fit to debate law enforcement. The chamber was hushed, the sort of hush that occurs when something connects so flawlessly that no one knows how to respond. AOC's visage cycled through 3 feelings in quick succession: shock, rage, and something that appeared almost like realization. The realization that she had committed a strategic blunder, and there was no method to reverse it on film. Chairman Jordan's expression was meticulously bland, but the Republican members behind him were not as controlled. Several were stifling grins. One was visibly beaming. AOC were reorganized. She possessed perhaps 90 seconds remaining. She could sense the time leaking away, feel the 5 minutes that were intended to be her platform crumbling into a wreck. She needed to alter the topic completely. She needed something that would place Patel back on defense. Director Patel, since you wish to discuss credentials and accountability, she said, her tone firmer now. The act vanished. genuine ire seeping through. Let us discuss yours. Your FBI has been charged with political oppression. You keep a roster of so-called government gangsters. You have targeted former FBI officials who probed your employer. You have transformed the Bureau into a private tool of vengeance for Donald Trump. Is that your concept of policing? Patel's look did not alter, but something adjusted behind his eyes. The tolerance of a man who has been waiting for precisely this gap. Congresswoman, I value your worry regarding accountability. Let me illustrate what accountability resembles by citing a few entries from the public log. Your log. He opened the red divider. July 2025. The House Ethics Committee, bipartisan, 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans, published its report on your presence at the 2021 Met Gala. The panel discovered unanimously that you impermissibly took gifts in breach of House regulations, codes of conduct, and federal statutes. Those gifts comprised a custom designer frock, professional hair and makeup services, adornments, and a complimentary pass for your partner. The panel discovered that you neglected to repay vendors in a prompt fashion, and that several vendors were only compensated after the inquiry commenced, and after they menaced your campaign. AOC's attorney, seated behind her, began to stand. She signaled him down. The gown, Patel proceeded, read, "Tax the Rich." You wore it at a function where tickets cost $35,000 per head. You wore a frock, demanding that the affluent pay their just portion, while accepting that frock and everything that accompanied it for free from the affluent. The committee labeled your behavior inconsistent with House rules, laws, and other standards of conduct. Those are their terms, not mine. The ethics panel found my infractions were not knowing and willful, AOC interjected. That is accurate. They did not find criminal intent. They found negligence. They found that you depended on staff and designers to estimate fair market value, and that those estimates, quote, did not fully account for the true cost of the unique goods and services you received. Which is another method of saying you took expensive gifts and did not bother to calculate their worth until someone compelled you. He flipped a sheet. Shall I proceed? Your former Chief of Staff, Saikat Chakrabarti, founded 2 political action committees, Justice Democrats PAC and Brand New Congress PAC, and a limited liability company, Brand New Congress LLC. Between 2016 and 2018, those PACs wired nearly $1 million to the LLC, which Chakrabarti owned under the label Strategic Consulting. Your campaign also paid his LLC for consulting, and his PAC, the one you sat on the board of, paid your then-boyfriend Riley Roberts $6,000 for marketing consulting. He allowed that to rest. You ran on the motto 100% people-funded, no corporate PAC money. That is still in your Twitter bio. Meanwhile, your chief of staff was running what the FEC complaint defined as a shadowy web of PACs and LLCs that moved nearly $1 million with scant transparency. The FEC probed. 3 of 6 commissioners voted to find reason to believe infractions had occurred. 3 voted against. A deadlock, which implies 3 federal election commissioners believed your campaign violated the statute. The matter was shuttered only because the FEC could not attain a majority, not because you were exonerated. And as recently as March of this year, Americans for Public Trust lodged another ethics grievance regarding your usage of taxpayer funds, specifically payments from your member representational allowance. That is the taxpayer-funded budget every legislator receives for official tasks, to a dance troupe and an individual tagged as training. When queried about it, you tweeted, and I quote, 100% wrong. None of this is taxpayer money. This is an FEC filing. He glanced upward. That declaration was untrue, Congresswoman. The payments in dispute were distributed from your MRA, your taxpayer-funded office budget, not from your campaign, not from an FEC filing. From the account the American taxpayer finances for your official obligations. You informed the public it was not their cash. It was. AOC's clock was flashing. She had 30 seconds remaining, perhaps 40. Her mind was sprinting, scrolling through the manual for the retort, for the pivot, for the item she could utter that would salvage this instant and transform it into something she could utilize. She located it. The solitary card she always played when everything else faltered. The emotional card, the migrant card, the card that had succeeded every single time because nobody, no Republican, no Fox News anchor, no hearing witness had ever been able to counter it without appearing like a brute. She leaned into the audio device, softened her tone, allowed the fury to drain away, and substituted it with something that sounded like anguish. Director Patel, I think it is obvious what is occurring here. You are utilizing this session to assault me because I defend migrant communities. Because I stand with people who are scared. Because I dare to challenge this regime's brutality. But I want to pose one final query, and I want you to reply honestly. She hesitated, looked at the lens, then back at him. Do you have any concept what it is like to be an immigrant in this nation right now? To wake up every morning petrified that your mother, your father, your children will be dragged out of their residences by armed men? And now, we are back where we commenced. This was the instant she believed would rescue her. The viral query. The snippet that would overwrite everything else. The migrant narrative that nobody could refute without appearing cold. But you already know what transpired. You heard it at the start. Patel told her regarding his parents, regarding Garden City, regarding Miami-Dade, regarding the detention cells and the destitute clients, and the years he spent shielding migrants in court while she was serving drinks in the Bronx. None of it was a slur. All of it was crushing. While I was in those tribunals defending migrants, ensuring they had attorneys, ensuring their constitutional liberties were guarded, he said, his voice still level, still measured, still the voice of a man reading facts into a log. You were utilizing them as props for fundraising emails. While I was ensuring undocumented defendants understood their right to counsel, you were broadcasting instructions on how to defy federal policing, which does not safeguard them. It places them in more peril. Your webinar did not give them lawyers, Congresswoman. It told them to resist. It told them to create friction. And when an undocumented person adheres to that advice and opposes a federal officer, they do not get protected. They get additional charges: obstruction, resisting arrest, assault on a federal agent, counts that make it virtually impossible for any attorney to assist them in avoiding removal. I protected migrants by defending them in court. You endangered them by telling them to fight agents carrying valid warrants, and then you raised funds on it. The timer on AOC's microphone went to 0. The crimson light expired. Her 5 minutes were concluded. She took her seat. She did not possess a retort. Not because there wasn't one. There is always a retort in politics, but because the one she required would have necessitated her to know things she did not know, to have prepped for a rival she had not studied, to have predicted that the man sitting at the testimony table was not the cartoon her team had briefed her on, but a litigator with a public defender's CV and a prosecutor's instinct for the throat. Chairman Jordan waited 3 seconds, then he spoke. The gentlewoman's time has elapsed. Director Patel, do you have anything to append for the record? Patel aligned his documents. Just briefly, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez questioned my credentials, my integrity, and my dedication to migrant communities today. I answered every query she posed. I would note for the record that she did not reply to any of mine. She asked me if I understand what migrants face. I do. My parents were migrants. I defended migrants in court. The query I would ask her, the query she did not answer, is simpler. If you say, tax the rich, why did you accept a free gown from them and not pay for it until investigators compelled you? If you say, no corporate PAC money, why did your chief of staff funnel nearly $1 million through PACs and shell companies that he managed? If you say you stand with migrants, why did you tell them to resist federal officers instead of giving them lawyers? And if you say none of this is taxpayer money, why was it your taxpayer-funded office account? He shut his binder. The American people deserve representatives who practice what they preach. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is very skilled at posing questions. She is less skilled at answering them. I answered all of hers today. She is welcome to answer mine any time. He reclined. Jordan moved the session forward. The next member began posing queries about fentanyl seizures. The hearing proceeded, but the hearing was finished. Everyone in the room knew it. The press gallery was already departing. The producers in the control booths were already splicing the video. The social media managers were already writing the posts. AOC sat in her chair. Rashida leaned over and whispered something. AOC shook her head. Her phone was vibrating. Casca, Stein, the whole squad, but she did not look at it. She stared straight ahead at the wall behind Patel's head. At nothing. Clyde tried again. AOC held up a hand. Not now. 3 rows behind her, Jamal Bowman sat with his arms folded, jaw clenched, watching the Republican side of the dais for any signal of gloating he could utilize as content. There was abundance. Several members were openly scrolling their mobiles, reading the real-time responses, sharing snippets that were already propagating. One aide was literally high-fiving another in the corridor outside the open door. Bowman photographed none of it. For once, the machine had nothing to work with. In AOC's Longworth office, Maya Torres sat immobilized in front of 3 screens. The first displayed the C-SPAN feed, still live. The second displayed Twitter, where #ReceiptsDon'tLie was climbing toward the top trending position. The third displayed the draft fundraising email that was supposed to go out 10 minutes ago, still unsent because the subject line, "I just confronted the FBI director about his attacks on immigrants. He didn't like it," no longer matched reality. The FBI director had liked it just fine. He had liked it so much that he had transformed every one of her strikes into a counterstrike, and the footage was already everywhere. Torres erased the draft, opened a new document, started typing. Today, the Trump administration's FBI director launched an unprecedented personal attack against me in a congressional hearing. She got halfway through the sentence and halted. It was not unprecedented. He had answered her queries on camera. That was the issue. You cannot label it an attack when the other person is simply responding to your queries with facts from public records. You cannot label it persecution when the evidence he cited was from a bipartisan ethics committee with 5 Democrats on it. She closed the document and dialed Casca. "What do we do?" Casca was silent for 3 seconds. "Then we do what we always do. We fundraise on it. We spin it as an assault on progressive values. We post our clips, not his. Mike, everyone has already seen his clips. Then we make better ones next time." But both of them knew, in the manner that political operatives know things they will never say aloud, that there was not going to be a next time with Patel. Not like this. AOC's power had always stemmed from the asymmetry of preparation. She prepped for performance, her opponents prepped for policy, and performance always won on camera. For the first time, she had faced someone who prepared for both. Someone who understood that a hearing chamber is a courtroom with cameras, and that the person who controls the record controls the narrative. For 4 minutes, no member of the squad posted anything on any platform. In the history of progressive social media, that silence was unprecedented. The clips went viral within the hour. Not AOC's clips, Patel's. The first snippet to break was the public defender exchange, 37 seconds. Patel's voice calm and flat, saying, "While I was in those courtrooms defending immigrants, you were using them as props for fundraising emails." It hit 15 million views by dinner time. By the next morning, it was at 47 million. The second snippet was the Met Gala takedown, 22 seconds. You wore a dress that said "Tax the Rich" at an event where tickets cost $35,000. You accepted the dress for free from the rich. Simple, brutal, memeable. Someone set it to the "Curb Your Enthusiasm" theme music, and it became the most shared political video of the month. The third snippet was the PAC question. Patel reading the numbers. Nearly $1 million through PACs and shell companies. Your Twitter bio still says no corporate PAC money. Someone screen-grabbed AOC's actual Twitter bio with the claim still there and put it next to the FEC filing side by side. The contrast did the work. AOC held a press conference 2 hours after the hearing ended. She stood in the hallway outside the Judiciary Committee room, flanked by Clyde and Jamal Bowman, and gave the speech her team had prepared. "What you saw today," she said, "was a political operative using the power of the FBI to attack a woman of color who dares to hold this administration accountable. This is what fascism looks like. This is what the suppression of dissent looks like. And I will not be silenced." The words were right. The delivery was right. The framing was right. But the problem was that Patel had not mentioned her race, had not mentioned her gender, had not mentioned dissent or fascism or suppression. He had mentioned an ethics committee report, FEC filings, a webinar transcript, and a tweet. He had read her own words back to her. He had cited bipartisan findings from a committee with 5 Democrats on it. The fascism defense did not stick because the attack it was designed to counter had not been made. Progressive media tried to spin it. Patel attacks AOC in political theater, ran the MSNBC chyron. FBI director uses hearing to target progressive lawmaker, read the Huffington Post headline. But the problem with spin is that it requires the audience to not watch the actual footage. And 47 million people had watched the actual footage. They had seen AOC ask the questions. They had seen Patel answer them. They had seen him read the Ethics Committee findings, the FEC complaint, her own tweet about taxpayer money. They could judge for themselves. In the Bronx, the reaction was complicated. AOC's district, New York's 14th, covering parts of the Bronx and Queens, is one of the most diverse in the country. It includes large immigrant communities, working-class families, small business owners, and the kind of people who work 60-hour weeks and do not have time for Twitter wars. A local news crew stopped at a bodega on Westchester Avenue. The owner, a Dominican woman named Carmen, who had lived in the Bronx for 31 years, gave an interview that was shorter and more devastating than anything said in the hearing room. "She wore a dress that cost more than my rent for a year," Carmen said. "A dress that says, 'Tax the Rich,' and she didn't even pay for it. She tells me she's fighting for me. But who's fighting for me When my rent goes up and she's at a party with celebrities. I voted for her 3 times. I'm not sure about a 4th. A young Ecuadorian man who worked at a car wash 2 blocks away was more direct. She told people to resist. My cousin followed that advice, resisted, got charged with obstruction. Now he can't get asylum because he has a criminal charge. Thanks to her advice, she was trying to get views on Facebook. My cousin is trying to not get deported. A retired public school teacher named Dolores, who had canvassed for AOC in 2018, said, "I still believe in what she stands for, but there's a difference between what you stand for and what you do. She stands for the working class, but she goes to the Met Gala and takes free dresses and doesn't pay the designers on time. Those designers are working people too." Where was the solidarity? It wasn't anger. It was the particular exhaustion of working-class voters who had believed the story and were starting to notice the footnotes. The polls moved, not dramatically. They never do after a single hearing. But the internal numbers that both parties watched closely showed something that alarmed Democrats. More than any headline, AOC's favorability among working-class Latino voters in her district dropped 4 points in a week. Not because they had suddenly become Republicans, but because they had seen the Met Gala dress and the Ethics Committee finding and the PAC money and the dance company payment. And they had done the math that working people always do. She says she's one of us, but she acts like she's one of them. Moderate Democrats, who had long been wary of AOC's influence on the party's brand, began to distance themselves quietly. No public statements, no dramatic breaks, just a subtle shift in the invitations that didn't come. The joint press conferences that weren't scheduled. The endorsements that were suddenly pending further review. In Washington, the withdrawal of warmth is how parties discipline their own. The deeper damage wasn't in any single clip or headline. It was in the pattern that Patel had laid bare. A pattern of systematic contradiction between brand and behavior that, once you saw it, you couldn't unsee. Tax the rich, but accept free designer goods from the wealthy. And pay only when investigators force you. 100% people-funded. But run $1 million PAC network through shell companies your chief of staff controls. Stand with immigrants, but tell them to resist federal officers instead of giving them lawyers, increasing their legal jeopardy for the sake of a viral clip. Government accountability, but tweet false information about your own office disbursements when caught using taxpayer money for dance classes. No single item was a career ender. Politicians survive ethics findings. They survive FEC complaints. They survive bad tweets. But the accumulation of them, laid out in sequence by a man who spoke like a prosecutor reading an indictment, created something that was harder to survive than any individual scandal, a credibility gap. The distance between what she said and what she did, the distance between the dress and the bill, between the slogan and the filing, between the performance and the record. Patel didn't call her a criminal. He didn't call her corrupt. He didn't call her a hypocrite, though the word hung in the room like smoke. He called her something worse, something more precise, something that in politics is more fatal than any accusation of crime. He called her someone who doesn't practice what she preaches, and he proved it with her own documents, her own words, her own ethics committee findings, not with conspiracy theories or partisan attacks, but with the boring, devastating paperwork of public accountability. She had walked into the hearing room as the questioner. She had walked out as the subject, not because Patel had attacked her, but because he had answered her questions and every answer was a mirror she didn't want to look into. In the weeks that followed, AOC did what she always did. She fundraised on the controversy. She posted her clips, carefully edited to show only her questions and not his answers. She gave interviews about political persecution and the silencing of progressive voices. The machine still worked. The donations still came. The followers still followed. But something had shifted, and everyone could feel it, even if nobody could quite name it. The shift wasn't in what people thought of her politics. It was in what people thought of her sincerity. And in politics, sincerity is the one thing you can't fundraise your way back to. Kash Patel returned to the Hoover Building after the hearing. He didn't hold a press conference. He didn't post on social media. He went back to work. There were cartel cases to review, fentanyl shipments to intercept, terrorism threats to assess, drone incursions to monitor before the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The kind of work that doesn't trend on Twitter because it's not designed to. When Bongino asked him how he thought it went, Patel shrugged. She asked questions. I answered them. That's how hearings are supposed to work. That's not how her hearings usually work, Bongino said. That's because nobody's ever treated her like opposing counsel before. They treat her like a celebrity. They get intimidated by the camera, by the followers, by the machine. They forget that it's a hearing room, not a studio. And in a hearing room, the person with the better preparation wins, not the person with the better Instagram. When a reporter asked him for comment the next day, he said only, I answered the Congresswoman's questions. I'm available to answer more anytime she'd like. That was it. No victory lap, no gloating, no hashtag, just a man with a binder full of receipts who had walked into someone else's performance and turned it into a trial. The receipts don't lie. That was the lesson. Not just for AOC, but for anyone who builds a brand on saying one thing while the paperwork says another. Sooner or later, someone reads the paperwork. And when they read it back to you on camera in front of the world, no amount of performance can make the numbers disappear. She had asked him if he understood what immigrants face. He did. He'd defended them in court while she was tending bar. He'd represented them in holding cells while she was planning her primary campaign. He'd made sure they had lawyers while she was telling them to resist officers. The question she should have asked, the question she would never ask because it has no good answer, is simpler than the one she chose. Who actually helped them? The man with the law degree and the public defender's caseload? Or the woman with the Instagram following and the free dress? She never answered.